So this video on ethics explores the social contract theory of Thomas Hobbes, and the basic idea is that we need moral and legal rules because we want to escape the state of nature, which is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So whenever students tell me that they are amoral, or they don't believe morality exists, I start them with social contract theory because it gives a really simple framework for understanding the origins of some moral rules, as well as a self-interested reason for being moral. So let's take a look at this. In the Leviathan, 1651, Thomas Hobbes asks us to imagine a state of nature in which there's no legal or moral rules. So in this state of nature, each person has the ability to kill others, and each wants limited resources like excellent food and shelter. Right? Now, in this state of nature, it quickly becomes a state of war, in which we're constantly disposed to harm others to achieve our goals. So if in the state of nature a really brilliant individual builds a beautiful house and productive machines and fruitful farms, others will come with, and this is Thomas Hobbes' quote, others will come with forces united to dispossess and deprive him, not only of the fruit of his labor, but also of his life or liberty. And this invader, again, is in the like danger of another. Okay, so in short, the state of nature is one of fear, violence, and distrust. Hobbes explains the state of nature would have, and this is his quote, no cultivating of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the comfortable building, no instruments of moving and removing, such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no literature, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death. And the life of man will be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So the question here is, how do we humans escape this pre-moral and pre-legal state of nature, which is awful? The best thing to do, according to Hobbes, is to get together and create moral and legal rules that will help everyone flourish. Everyone must agree to these rules. They must agree to a sort of social contract. For example, they should agree to give up their liberty to kill others so they can receive the benefits of civilization. Again, the social contract theory is composed of moral and legal rules that help everyone flourish. We create property rights, and farms flourish. We create moral and legal rules against stealing, and investment and industry blossom. We create militaries and a police force, and the fearful natural state dissipates. So self-interested and rational people, that is, egoists, should follow these rules because it's in their self-interest to do so. So the idea of Thomas Hobbes, which was revolutionary in the 17th century, is that morality is not a heavenly or divine matter. It's simply a matter of creating rules that maximize your self-interest. Again, we have egoism. So we should create rules that lead to human flourishing because general flourishing causes individual flourishing. A rising tide lifts all ships. Now, at this point, it's interesting to think about whether social contract theory implies the invention or discovery of moral and legal rules. And I think it's both, right? So morality is analogous to the invention of the wheel. We can create square wheels, triangular wheels, circular wheels, but we discover which one works best, the circular one. And so it is with morality. Cultures can create all sorts of rules, but some rules lead to human flourishing and some don't. Some pull us ever towards the dreaded state of nature, right? And so morality is both invented and discovered. Okay, so how do we use social contract theory to judge moral opinions and practices? Now, since morality is partly discovered, social contract theory gives the framework and tools we need to judge the moral practices of all cultures. So, for example, in the Elements of Moral Philosophy, James Rachels explains why Martin Luther King Jr. was justified in non-violently breaking the law. According to social contract theory, he is only obligated to obey the law because we gain certain benefits in return for accepting certain burdens. Again, the benefits are living in a society instead of a state of nature. Now, since African Americans were not receiving the benefits of living in society, they had no obligation to obey the law under social contract theory. So James Rachels concisely summarized how social contract theory justifies civil disobedience. And here's his quote. This line of reasoning suggests that civil disobedience is not an undesirable last resort for socially disenfranchised groups. Rather, civil disobedience is the most natural and reasonable means of expressing protest. For when the disadvantaged are denied the benefits of social living, They are released from the contract that would otherwise require them to follow society's rules. This is the deepest argument for civil disobedience, and the social contract theory presents it clearly and forcefully. So that's it. That's a social contract theory. Let's look at some criticisms, some weaknesses of it next. So the weaknesses of social contract theory. Notice how social contract theory, like ethical egoism, reduces morality to self-interest. That is, the reason you should be moral is because it's in your self-interest to live in society instead of a state of nature. But can your morality be reduced to self-interest? So to answer this question, you can attempt to imagine scenarios where you think an act is good, but it's not in your self-interest. For example, imagine you have the choice of saving 10 children or yourself. If you can imagine such scenarios and you think it's best to save the children, then not all of your morality can be reduced to social contract theory, because not all of your morality is self-interested. Right? Now I can give you other examples of some of your moral beliefs that probably aren't based on self-interest. But I think Hobbes might have a response here. He might argue that some of your moral sensibilities arise only after you live in society. So according to Hobbes, societal living creates altruistic habits of mind and feeling that do not exist as strongly, if at all, in the state of nature. So it would not surprise Hobbes to find that some moral beliefs are not self-interested. Under his view, social contract theory explains the self-interested origins of both self-interested and altruistic morality. So for him, the paradox is that altruism arises from self-interest, and I'll leave it to you to weigh the merits of his view. Here's another criticism, and this one comes from John Locke, who argued the state of nature is pre-legal but not pre-moral. This means people have moral rights before any government arises, and these moral rights are based in, quote, natural laws and, quote, the God of nature. Therefore, the purpose of governments and contracts is to protect basic rights, not create them. Now, for example, the United States Declaration of Independence is derived from Locke's understanding of moral rights because it speaks of rights given by the laws of nature and nature's God. So the Declaration reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Okay, so Hobbes' social contract theory does not fully explain morality, because morality exists before society and governments are formed. Governments may get their power from the consent of the governed, but moral rights exist before any consent is given. So if you agree with Locke's analysis, then Hobbes' social contract theory may explain where much of morality comes from, but it doesn't explain the whole of it. Okay, a third criticism of social contract theory is that it weakens moral motivation. It allows one to more easily justify immoral acts. So for example, imagine that Mr. Baggins believes cheating is wrong. However, as a social contract theorist, he only believes it's wrong because he desires the benefits of social living and wants to avoid the state of nature. In this case, Mr. Baggins could rationalize cheating because one act of cheating will not lead to a lack of general trust or the collapse of society. So he easily justifies a prima facie immoral act here. And most people feel there are powerful reasons for being moral, but social contract theory provides little motivation, little reason. According to social contract theory, an act is morally good if it's in your self-interest and will not cause the downfall of society. So according to this theory, there's nothing wrong with murder, stealing, and torturing kittens for fun, as long as you know you will not get caught. Okay. Again, the criticism is that social contract theory doesn't explain the whole of your morality. It does not explain why you think these acts are wrong. All right. A fourth criticism of social contract theory is that it misrepresents human nature in a state of nature. So Hobbes portrays humans as atomistic, isolated, selfish individuals who constantly seek their self-interest. But Rousseau and others disagree with this view of humanity. For Rousseau, the state of nature is more harmonious than society because people live in small communities with abundant resources. Humans naturally feel pity and love and altruism in the state of nature. According to Rousseau and others, most people in their natural states are actually noble savages. And the formation of property and contracts are a corruption of this morally ideal state, not the conditions that create morality. Okay, so a related criticism comes from feminists like Baer, who argue the contract only explains the ideas of rights and obligations. It doesn't really capture what it means to be a fully moral person. A fully moral person is not an isolated, self-interested, economic contractarian. Rather, a fully moral person cares for caring's sake. A fully moral person is altruistic as well as self-interested. A fully moral person recognizes their dependence on others, and this recognition deepens their morality. In short, this criticism is based on the idea that the Western and the legalistic idea of a contract cannot fully explain all aspects of what it means to be a fully moral in both nature and civilization. So my conclusion is that although social contract theory has some weaknesses, it's a powerful theory that gives a clear reason for being moral most of the time, perhaps. We should be moral because it's in our self-interest to live in a society instead of state of nature. Okay, so let's consider these questions real quick. Number one, and these are discussion questions. If you were in my classroom, we would discuss them. In the state of nature, why would there be no farming literature and so on? And the answer is perhaps we would not have the time or confidence to create them. Number two, can you think of any examples in history or literature where Hobbes' awful state of nature existed? Well, perhaps in war-torn countries, or you might mention Lord of the Flies or the Hunger Games. You know, there's a lot of interesting possibilities there. Number three, what's wrong with cheating? According to social contract theory, cheating decreases trust, a trust that holds society together and protects us from the state of nature. However, the theory does not clearly explain why cheating is wrong if it's in your self-interest and it will not cause the collapse of society. Number four, according to social contract theory, why should you be moral? Well, you should be moral because it's in your self-interest. Society is better than the state of nature. Number five, according to social contract theory, morality is ultimately based on self-interest. Is that correct? In your moral opinion, are there some acts that are immoral even though they're in your self-interest? And basically, this is a question about ethical egoism, right? And you can read up on that or see the video on that for more. Number six, are some groups of people, like minorities, infants, and animals, left out of the social contract because they can't give consent? Is this a problem for the theory? And maybe, the answer is maybe, perhaps, infants, the mentally impaired, animals, posterity, cannot give their consent to this contract. The contract is based on the idea that rational and self-interested people will give up some of their power to get the benefits of society. But how can this contract account for moral duties to individuals who cannot benefit us or give their consent? It's a good discussion. Number seven, what does it mean to give consent to the social contract? Have you consented to the rule of your government? So the answer, I guess, is consent is a tricky concept. Do you give consent by continuing to live in this country? It's a good discussion. All right. Number eight, evaluate this criticism. There's no actual physical contract, so social contract theory is false. Okay. Well, I think we need not believe social contract theory to be a historical account to take it seriously. The point is that it's an implicit contract, a way of understanding the origin and purpose of moral rules and legal rules. And maybe that's how we should look at it. And then finally, I get this sometimes, is it logically consistent for a person to believe in God and social contract theory? And I think it depends on the type of religion. Perhaps God created moral rules so each person could flourish, if there is a God. Perhaps God is a social contractarian. Right. So whatever you think, again, I think it has some weaknesses, but it's a powerful theory that gives us a clear reason for being moral most of the time. Again, we should be moral because it's in our self-interest to live in a society instead of a state of nature, which of course is solitary, poor, Nasty, brutish, and short. Thanks.